honor to be with you this morning. And I have spent most of my career in organizational development and design, trying to understand why people do what they do, and sometimes why they won't do what we want them to do, and really studying relationship effectiveness. But if Tim Ferriss, the best-selling author of The 4-Hour Workweek, is accurate in saying that it takes 10,000 hours to be an expert at something, let me say to you today that I come to you with over 140,000 hours of study on the ADHD relationship. I came to that being about 16 years ago when I met a very handsome man who happened to have an ADHD mind. I then married him, and I was intrigued by the way that he saw the world differently, he moved through the world differently, and 13 years ago, to solidify my place as an expert in the ADHD relationship, we created a son together that also possesses an ADHD mind. So I've become passionate about this topic. So I come to you today not as a scientist or a psychologist or a pharmacist, nothing with an ist. I come to you today with the passion of a wife and a mother. And I come to you today because I think we have some really interesting things to talk about as it relates to ADHD. I think on one side there is a huge problem that exists that's in direct relationship to the topic today around sustainability. But I also believe that there is a huge opportunity that exists that also relates to the topic of innovation. So let me set up for you, if I can, a little bit of a metaphor. And as I was crafting this metaphor to prepare for this talk today, I ran it by my biggest critic, who is my 13-year-old son. And he assures me, in his ADHD mind, this is the way that life is. On one side of the ADHD mind is this hurricane of information, and there's so many thoughts and there's so many ideas they can't all possibly stick because they move so fast, and there's a bit of chaos that's created, and in that chaos things get spun out. Oftentimes those things get spun out are missing homework assignments. I forgot to pick the milk up when I come home from dinner. Where is my backpack? And it's the chaos of ADHD that we often think about and talk about and joke about, and it is real, and they can't help it. But on the other side of ADHD, as that mind is spinning and things are going so quickly, oftentimes they will come upon a topic or two that is so exciting and so important that it takes them down into this deep dive, more like a scuba diver, where they can't think about anything else, and everything else quiets around them, and they want to explore it and take it wherever it can go. And if you've ever studied ADHD, you know that this term is hyperfocus. And if you've ever tried to call a 13-year-old boy in hyperfocus down to dinner, you will know it's impossible. Because they can go for hours and days without eating or thinking or even knowing you're aware. This is an opportunity. So for the problem side of things, let me share with you a few statistics. They're staggering and are not sustainable. And these are widely accepted in the world of ADHD. If you have a family where one of the spouse or one of the children has ADHD, they are 3 times more likely to divorce above our already staggering divorce rates. 3 times. They're also 300% more likely to have a drug and alcohol problem. That's not sustainable. So let me tell you where I believe we either create the problem or we're at least exacerbating the problem from what I observe. And it is, as Craig mentioned, our industrial age factory model of education. So doesn't it look a little bit like this, right? So we bring all the kids in as generalists, and we line them up on this side of education, and we send them down the assembly line. And they go to school, and every 40 minutes they get dipped into a new topic and a new subject area, all the way through to the end, right? And at the end, there's the quality control inspector who reviews the grades of the assembly line. And if, in fact, they have passed, they are stamped with a diploma of education. Well, what does that look like for the ADHD mind? Well, they line up with the rest of the generalists, excited in the beginning of their new opportunity, but they brought with them a hurricane. And this hurricane walks every 40 minutes through a new topic throughout the day. And if they're lucky, there is one 40-minute period out of that day where that topic is so interesting that they can't help but go into that deep dive of understanding, and they want to explore that topic. One period out of the day, often if they're lucky. And they get to the end of the assembly line of education, and the quality control inspector is standing there reviewing their grades. and they're hoping they get the stamp of diploma or certificate of education. They hope that they don't get spun out as a reject or a defect. And even if in fact they get out with a diploma, there has been an experience through that assembly line that has scarred some of their heads and their hearts about being a reject and a defect, because not all of their information could stay in. So as a wife and a mother, that troubles me greatly. And if you look at Russell Barkley's statistics around ADHD teenagers, listen to this. 21% of ADHD teens repeatedly skip school. Well, wouldn't you? 30% just drop out. 35% drop out. 30% fail a subject or have to repeat a year. And 35% get suspended. So let me suggest to you, even if they get stamped with a diploma of education, they've been impacted. And that carries on to an adulthood. There's a website called crimetimes.org that studied prisons across the country. And the statistics show that it's likely that 86% of our prison population has ADHD. 86%. As a wife and a mom, that scares the crap out of me. There are 18 million people in our country with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and we are failing them in this system. So let me suggest to you, therein lies the problem, but I think there's a huge opportunity. And the opportunity exists over here with the fact that you get them into this deep dive, they're brilliant. Our son entered into 6th grade last year. And at the beginning of the year, the assessment showed that he was reading as a senior and writing as a sophomore at the beginning of 6th grade. Not a bad kid. He entered into the school year. He started off with reading and English grades of B+, then it went to a B-, then it went to a C, and he finished the year with a D. At the end of the year, the assessment showed that he was still reading and writing in the top 10% of his kids his age in the state. And he came to me on the last day of school, and he sat down across my desk in our home office, and his head was down, and his shoulders were slumped, and he was choking back tears. And he said, I got a D. Well, I knew he got a D. I'd been watching it on Power School all year, and I've been trying to communicate with the teachers in the assembly line who don't like the hurricane in their class because that makes their job hard, and I get that. So all I could do as a mom is I had him lift his eyes up to meet mine, and I said, hey, hold on a minute. And I pulled out the copies of the assessments that I keep copies of, and I said, remember this? You were most likely the smartest kid in your class. Brightened up a little bit, and he said, do you think? I said, I don't think, I know, and I've got the statistics to prove it. He said, but I got a D. I said, yes, young man, you did. And let me remind you, and let me apologize for the fact that you live in a time when your education system does not match the needs that you have. And your grades will almost always likely be a measure of your organizational ability, not your intelligence. And I'm also sorry to say that your organizational ability will probably always suck. So if you let that determine who you are, we're both in trouble. We can't let that happen. And I won't let that happen. So if we're going to take this opportunity to educate these brilliant minds with a deep sea dive, we first have to see it differently. And my recommendation to you is that we see ADHD as not wrong, just different. And we start to look at the opportunity to educate the deep sea dive of passion and interest and exploration, where the innovation and the creativity exist. So picture this, if you will. Imagine this happening in our school system today. Mr. and Mrs. Smith have a son, and his name is little Johnny. And little Johnny's in 2nd grade, and he's struggling at school, and his teachers are struggling, and his parents know he's struggling. And they call and they say, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, we want to test little Johnny for ADHD. And instead of being panicked, like often we are as parents, we say, okay, and you send him off for the test, and the doctor comes in and says, yes, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, little Johnny does in fact have ADHD. And instead of the panic that we often have when we're unsure of what's about to happen, and when they recommend that little Johnny needs some special education, we also don't panic. Because what we're going to mean by special education in that moment is little Johnny is a specialist. Little Johnny is an innovator and he is a creator, and he possesses the kind of mind that will never fit an assembly line. So little Johnny, I've got good news for you, buddy. You no longer work on the assembly line. You now are going to be educated in research and development. You know how a class built for you. You're an R&D guy. You're not an assembly line guy. And we're going to let you learn based on the topics that you can't not explore. For our son, when he was in elementary school, his topic of interest and passion and exploration was dinosaurs. Well, sure, Rebecca, what young boy isn't interested in dinosaurs? Well, let me tell you, this was different. For over 3 years, he wouldn't talk about anything but dinosaurs. And his father and I were a little worried and thought, he needs to be more well-rounded, don't you think? And every time we would try to introduce another hobby or topic, he'd just revert it back and compare it to dinosaurs. And one day he comes running down the stairs and he's breathless and he's clutching a book, of course, at dinosaurs. And I'm in the kitchen and he says, Mom, 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 what? We got to call the guy that wrote this book. And we called the illustrator. I got their names right here. Can you look up their numbers? How are we going to find their numbers? We've got to call him right now. And I said, you just need to breathe. What's the matter? Well, look right here. Look at this picture. Look at this picture of this dinosaur. Yeah? Look how many toes it has. 2. That's right. And it's not right, because it's an Allosaurus. And everybody knows that an Allosaurus doesn't have that many toes. A T-Rex has 2 toes, moms, and short little arms so they can push themselves up from the ground when they're done eating. An Allosaurus has 3 toes and long arms so they can slash their prey. This is wrong. He was in 1st grade. I also knew at that very moment that he was brilliant, but his 1st grade teacher had also called me just the weeks before and said, you know, Mrs. Hession, we're no longer going to allow your son to be in his advanced reading classes because he can't finish his journal assignment on time. The assembly line was starting to have a reject button that my son wasn't meeting that criteria. I also learned that in journal time, you weren't allowed to choose the topic that you wrote about. It was assigned to you on the assembly line. And I assured her that if she would allow my son to journal about dinosaurs, she wouldn't be able to get him to stop. And in fact, she'd learn a lot in the process. So I believe we have this opportunity to do it differently. So there's an example from my home. Who really cares? You may never see me again. Let me give you 3 examples of household names that are probably more important to you. David Nealman is the founder of JetBlue Airways. When he founded JetBlue Airways, was the airline industry in desperate need of innovation? David Nealman is ADHD. He changed the way that we saw what was possible about the airline because it was his deep dive of exploration. Another one, Jamie Oliver, famous chef, which many of you may know from the Food Network, Today Show, cookbooks, brilliant, brilliant ADHD guy. And food is his deep dive of exploration, the thing that he can't not think about. But Jamie Oliver is a creator and an innovator, and it's not just enough for him to be on the Today Show and write great cookbooks. Jamie Oliver has to start a food revolution because he can't stop thinking about it. And he's insanely aware of the fact that we have an obesity epidemic, and that many of our kids are suffering with diabetes, and he's out to change the world by changing the way our school cafeterias work. He's an ADHD mind who is so innovative and so creative, you can't stop him, but he doesn't do well on the assembly line. He is research and development. Paul Orfello is the founder of Kinko's. He's also ADHD. He flunked the 2nd grade. He received C's and D's in college and was expelled from several institutions before he finally graduated. He says that the only reason that he really graduated is because his parents just kept telling him he was okay. I am 45 years old and I do not remember how I got copies before Kinko's. Do you? He saw a need that we didn't even know we had because he's an innovator and he's a creator. And he says this about having ADHD. With ADD, you're curious. You can think big without getting weighed down with the details. He doesn't work on the assembly line. He's in research and development. And just to affirm that thought, Sally Shaywitz, a professor of pediatrics at Yale University, says the restlessness of ADHD can be a motivator for action, and the curiosity and adventurousness it brings can propel entrepreneurs to take bold chances and ignore naysayers in developing truly unique products and services. They don't work on the assembly line. So let me suggest to you that if we are going to truly capitalize on the innovation and the creativity of the ADHD mind, we have to see things differently. We have to see them as not wrong, just different. So I want to leave you with this challenge today, to plant the seed, if you will. To understand that our current model of education is taxing our system so greatly, and if there are currently 18 million people that are diagnosed conservatively with ADHD and those numbers growing, we can't sustain that model. So we have to start today by seeing them different, by seeing them as the research and development department, of which they really are. Maybe it's you with ADHD, and I finally have just today given you the permission to be the great creator and innovator that you are, and you're going to let go of those stamps of rejects and defects that the assembly line may have given to you over time. Maybe it's your son or your daughter, or your niece or your nephew. With this many people in the world with ADHD, there is someone that you love, or that you work with, or you spend time in your circle. And here's what I want you to do. I want you to enter into a conversation and a relationship with him. Not aggravated by the chaos of the hurricane. It is aggravating. I live with it every day. But instead of focusing there, I want you just for a minute to see them differently. And I want you to engage in a conversation about something that's so interesting to them that they're going to take you on a deep dive journey, and you're going to learn more about their topic of interest than you ever knew was possible. And they're going to surprise you. And then I want you to be the one in their lives that encourages them, that helps to educate them, that challenges them, that says to them, we need you to innovate and change our world, and I want to help you do that. I may not be able to change the factory model of education today, but if I can plant enough seeds in this room today that you can go out and inspire an innovator, it's going to change the way that we see the world and the way that we live in the world, and that's not a bad day. So, for ADHD, your challenge, see them differently. What are they?
Research and development.
And we're going to see them as not wrong, just different. Absolutely. Thank you so much.